The sound of splintering wood is not exactly what a man wants to hear before breakfast. But that morning, I heard it again, the heavy groan of my ranch gate giving way, like an old soldier falling to his knees. I set down my coffee, walked out to the porch, and there she was, Karen. Her shiny white SUV barreled straight through as if my land was nothing more than a shortcut on her GPS. Dust billowed up behind her tires, sunlight glinting off that ridiculous HOA strong bumper sticker. She didn't wave, didn't slow down. She just drove on, sunglasses hiding the smug look I knew she was wearing. The first time it happened, I thought maybe she'd made a mistake. The second time, I thought she was testing me. By the third, I knew she was daring me. And let me tell you, I'm not the kind of man who takes kindly to being dared, especially not on my own land. I didn't move out here to fight battles. After 30 years of construction, dust in my lungs, inspectors breathing down my neck, and HOA rules telling me what color my mailbox had to be, I just wanted quiet. I wanted to breathe without someone knocking on my door with a clipboard. When I bought this ranch, I pictured wide skis, cattle grazing at dawn, and a heavy wooden gate swinging shut with a satisfying thud each night. That gate wasn't just wood and hinges. It was my line in the sand. I built it myself, cedar beams cut by hand, iron hinges I welded in my shop. It was my way of saying, this is mine and it ends here. The first time I met her, I should have known. She rolled up slow, window halfway down, blonde bob trimmed neat as a ruler. Big sunglasses covered half her face. "Lovely place," she said. I nodded, "Thanks." Then, without another word, she pressed the gas and rammed straight through my closed gate. The hinges screamed. The cedar scraped. And just like that, she was halfway across my pasture, dust trailing behind her like a flag of conquest. I stood there, stunned. My first thought was maybe GPS misled her. But then I remembered the way she glanced in her rearview mirror, the way her lips curled into a half-smile as she waved. No, this wasn't a mistake. This was defiance. That night I repaired the gate, reset the posts, reinforced the hinges, muttered to myself the whole time. I told myself maybe it wouldn't happen again, but it did. A week later, I heard the rumble of her engine again. She didn't slow down this time. She sped up, blasting through my gate like she was storming a castle. I ran out, waving my arms, yelling, "That's private property." She leaned out her window and shouted back, "Community easement," before disappearing down the gravel. Community easement? My blood boiled. I knew my deed forward and backward. No easement. No shared road. Nothing. But she said it like it was scripture, as if the HOA wrote the law of the land. I went to the feed store later that week, bought more nails and posts, and told the old-timers what happened. They just shook their heads. One spit sunflower seeds into a cup and said, "Good luck with that. Karen runs the HOA like a kingdom. Folks been fighting her for years." The other chimed in, "She'll bleed you dry with complaints if you push back. Best to let her be." But I didn't like that advice. Let her be. Let her tear down my gate whenever she felt like it. Not on my land, not in my lifetime. The third time I caught her in the act. I was stacking firewood when I heard tires on gravel. She pulled up to the gate, revving her engine. When she saw me, she smirked. "You really ought to keep this open," she said. "This is my gate," I shot back. "My property, you're trespassing." Her chin lifted, lips curling like she'd tasted something sour. "Don't be so selfish. This road saves me 10 minutes every morning. It's called community spirit." I laughed. "Lady, this is trespassing. You're damaging my property." That smirk hardened into something colder. "You're new here. Maybe you don't understand. The HOA sets the rules around here. You're not above them." That was the first time I heard her say it, like HOA authority was a crown she wore, like I should bow to it. I told her to turn around. She didn't. She drove through anyway, dust spraying across my boots. That night, I didn't just feel angry. I felt something worse, violated. Every splinter of that broken gate felt like her laughing in my face. And when the other HOA board members started following her lead, driving across my land like it was theirs, I knew it wasn't just about wood and hinges anymore. It was about respect. It was about whether my land was really mine. And that's when the war began. You ever notice how the quietest nights can turn into the loudest memories? It was just past midnight when I heard it again, splintering wood, sharp as a rifle crack. I grabbed my flashlight, boots half-laced, and stormed outside. The night was still except for the creak of my broken gate swinging in the wind. Dust still hung in the air like smoke. In the distance, Karen's taillights shrank into the dark. She didn't even bother pretending anymore. No excuse, no wave, no smug comment, just raw defiance. That was when I realized this wasn't about convenience. This was about control. The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Thick white paper, bold HOA letterhead, and black ink spelling out my so-called violations. According to them, my ranch gate didn't conform to community aesthetics. I had 7 days to remove it or face daily fines. I almost laughed, almost, because the truth was, even though I wasn't in their HOA, even though my land sat clearly outside their jurisdiction, I knew what this was. It was a warning shot. Karen wasn't satisfied with busting through my gate anymore. She was trying to erase it. I drove into town that same day, marched into the county clerk's office, and double-checked the records. My land, my deed, no easements, no oversight. I walked out of there with copies in my hand, proof that I was right. But as I drove home, my chest still felt heavy, because a piece of paper doesn't mean much when the people in power just pretend it doesn't exist. I tried to hold on to hope. I parked my old Chevy pickup right behind the gate one Sunday morning, sat on the tailgate with a thermos of coffee, dogs at my feet, and waited. Sure enough, dust rose on the horizon. Karen's SUV barreled toward me like always. She slowed, rolled her window down, and gave me that smirk. "You're wasting your time. This road is for everyone." I shook my head, calm, steady. "No, ma'am, this road is mine. The deed says so." She leaned out further, her sunglasses catching the sun. "You can't own land that blocks community access. It's against the law." I almost choked on my coffee. Against the law? I'd checked the county records twice. But she said it with such confidence, you'd think she'd written the statutes herself. We stared each other down in silence. Then with a sharp huff, she slammed her SUV into reverse and tore off. Gravel sprayed across my boots. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd won. But the very next day, I came home to find my gate lying flat on the ground. Posts snapped, hinges twisted, fresh tire tracks cut across my pasture like scars. Karen had escalated. And she wasn't alone anymore. That week, I spotted a maroon minivan with a Pine Hollow HOA decal cruising through, then a silver sedan with the treasurer's name on the license plate. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. My land had become their new shortcut. I tried reason one more time, though I don't know why. I walked into the HOA office, a polished brick building that looked more like a law firm than a neighborhood association. Inside, Karen sat at a desk stacked with binders. She didn't even look up right away. When she finally did, her eyes dripped disdain. "We need to talk," I said. She smiled sweetly. "Oh good, you're here about your fines." "My what?" She slid a paper across the desk. Line after line of violations, unapproved structures, unkempt land, failure to comply with HOA road easements. Total, nearly $3,000. "You're out of your mind," I said. "I'm not even in your HOA." Her tone sharpened. "Don't play games. Every property here falls under our charter." "That's a lie, and you know it. County clerk confirmed I'm outside your boundary lines." Karen leaned back, tapping her manicured nails against the armrest. "Boundaries are flexible when community welfare is at stake." I shook my head. "Boundaries are legal, and mine aren't flexible." Her lips thinned. "You'll regret this stubbornness." I walked out of that office with my fists clenched, her words burning like acid. She wasn't bluffing. She was declaring war. Later that week, one of her board members came strutting up while I was fixing fence posts. Clipboard in hand, voice sharp. "Sir, you can't keep rebuilding that gate. HOA has voted. The road stays open." I wiped sweat from my brow, leaned on the post hole digger. "Funny, I don't recall voting in your HOA because I'm not in it." He scribbled something on his clipboard. "Failure to comply will result in further penalties." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'll need more than a clipboard to scare me, pal." He stomped off, muttering, "Karen will handle you." And handle me she did. One night I woke to the crash of wood splitting. grabbed my flashlight, shotgun slung over my shoulder, not loaded just for show, and stormed outside. My gate lay in pieces again. Corinne's SUV taillights glowed in the distance. This time she didn't shout excuses or wave smugly. She just drove through, daring me to stop her. I stood there in the dark, fists trembling, watching the wreckage of what I'd built. My ranch didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt invaded. That was the night irritation hardened into resolve. Corinne thought she was untouchable. She thought a shiny SUV and an HOA title made her queen. But she forgot one thing: some of us weren't built to bow. Some of us were built to fight back. And me, I was done patching gates. Next time she barreled through, she wasn't going to find wood. She was going to find steel. Some people break you down with fists. Others do it with words. Corinne, she tried with both wheels and paperwork, and when neither worked, she doubled down. A few nights after the last time she smashed through my gate, I found another envelope waiting in my mailbox. The paper was heavier this time, official-looking. Notice of violation. Ranch entrance obstructs community traffic. Remove gate within 7 days or face daily fines of $250. I stood on my porch, letter trembling in my hand. My dogs circled at my feet, sensing the tension. I looked down that gravel drive where the cedar planks used to stand proud, and I knew this wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was war. That evening, Corinne herself came marching up the steps of my porch, clipboard in hand, heels clicking like gunshots on the wood. She didn't even wait for me to open the door before she started waving papers in my face. "You've been warned," she declared. "Take down that gate or the HOA will escalate legal action." I leaned against the frame, arms crossed, voice steady. "Corinne, this isn't your land. This isn't your road. You don't make the rules here." Her face flushed red, jaw tight. "I am the president of Pine Hollow, HOA, and every road in this community." I cut her off. "This isn't your community. My deed proves it." For half a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, doubt, but then it hardened into venom. "You're a selfish man," she hissed. "You're denying your neighbors access. This road is a public benefit." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You mean your shortcut to coffee runs? Don't dress it up as some noble cause." She glared at me, lips curling. "You'll regret this." Then she turned on her heel and stormed off, heels digging into my porch like claws. The following week was chaos. HOA board members started showing up, peering over my fences with clipboards and cameras. They took photos of my barn, my hay bales, even the rusted tractor I kept behind the shed. When I confronted one of them, a wiry guy with sunken eyes, he didn't even flinch. "Documenting violations," he said smugly. "Violations of what?" I snapped. "Community standards." "This isn't your community," I barked back, but he just scribbled something down and walked away. That night I sat on my porch, lantern flickering, coffee growing cold in my hand. Headlights cut across the dark. Corinne's SUV right on schedule. She didn't slow down, she didn't even look. She rammed straight through the flimsy repair I'd managed, splinters flying. My dogs barked, horses spooked, gravel spraying like a storm. And that was it. That was the breaking point. I felt it in my chest, heavy and hot. This wasn't irritation anymore. It was resolve. Every man has a line, and she'd crossed mine for the last time. 3 nights later, it got worse. Not just Corinne this time. 3 cars in a row, hers leading, 2 HOA board members behind. They barreled through, headlights bouncing across my pasture, laughing like teenagers sneaking into a carnival. My gate exploded into pieces, cedar scattering across the gravel. I shouted until my throat burned, but they didn't stop. They were making a point. The next morning, I drove into town, furious, walked into the sheriff's office, letter of deed in hand. The deputy chewed on a toothpick, listened with half an ear, then shook his head. "Without video proof, it's your word against theirs, and you know Corinne's got influence. She'll spin this as you blocking a community road." I gripped the edge of the counter so tight my knuckles whitened. "So that's it? Nothing you can do?" He just shrugged. "Not unless you've got evidence." Driving home that afternoon, my steering wheel creaked under the pressure of my hands. No help from the law, no respect from the HOA, no peace in my own home. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I knew what I had to do. That evening, as I hammered a makeshift repair into place, Karen showed up again. SUV purring, window sliding down. She didn't even get out at first, just smirked at me. "You're wasting your time. We'll keep driving through until that gate is gone. Accept it." I straightened, sweat dripping down my back. "You think you own me? Think again. This is my land, and I'll defend it." Her smile was cold, practiced. "We'll see. Tomorrow the board is voting to remove your gate permanently, with or without your consent." I leaned closer, just enough for her to see the fire in my eyes. "You may have your board, Karen, but I've got something better, a backbone and a plan." She faltered for just a moment, then recovered, sneered, and sped off into the night. And me, I went inside, cleared the table, and spread out scrap paper. My hands were steady as I drew: steel posts, reinforced hinges, hidden defenses, a design that looked like a simple wooden ranch gate, but beneath it, a trap. Wood was weak, hinges were weak, but steel remembers. That night, as the lantern flickered low, I leaned back and whispered into the quiet air. "Some gates swing open, but mine's going to bite back." The next morning I woke before dawn. The air was crisp, the kind of quiet that makes every sound sharper. I slipped on my boots, grabbed my gloves, and walked out to the barn. Enough patching, enough repairing. If Karen wanted to keep pushing, then I was done playing defense. I wasn't just going to build a gate. I was going to build a wall disguised as one. I dragged out the steel beams I'd salvaged years ago from a demolition site. They'd been sitting behind the barn, rust clinging to their edges, forgotten. But as I laid them out in the dirt, they gleamed like new soldiers ready for duty. Heavy, unyielding, the kind of steel meant to hold up bridges, not ranch gates. This wasn't going to be something you could nudge open with an SUV bumper. This was going to be a fortress. I drilled into the earth, deeper than ever before, sinking 6-foot posts into the ground. I poured concrete footings, reinforced with rebar cages. Sweat poured down my back, my shirt plastered to my skin, dust clinging to my arms. Each post went in with a groan, the kind of sound that tells you it isn't moving for anyone. Then came the welding. Sparks flew into the night as my torch cut across steel. The smell of burnt metal filled the air, mixing with the scent of summer grass. My dogs lay nearby, ears twitching every time I struck an arc, their eyes watching like they understood I wasn't just fixing something. I was preparing for battle. From the road, anyone passing by would just see me working, same as always, a rancher fixing his gate. But behind the cedar planks I bolted onto the steel frame, something else was taking shape. A hidden wall, a gate that only looked breakable. And I wasn't done. Stopping her car wasn't enough. Karen needed to learn that shortcuts come with consequences. So I dug shallow trenches just beyond the gate. On the surface, they looked like gravel. Beneath, I laid rows of hardened steel spikes welded into concrete troughs, camouflaged perfectly. If anyone tried to ram through again, the gate would hold, and the spikes would shred their tires like paper. For 3 nights straight, I worked under lantern light, sweat dripping into the dirt, sparks dancing off steel. The rhythmic clang of my hammer echoed across the pasture. My hands blistered, muscles ached, but every strike gave me purpose. Neighbors drove by, slowing to watch. Some shook their heads, others asked questions. One old-timer leaned out his truck window and asked, "Fixing that gate again?" I smiled through the sweat. "Not fixing, upgrading." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Around here, men know better than to step into another man's feud. Of course, word got back to Karen. One afternoon, I spotted her SUV idling just beyond my property line. Windows tinted, engine humming like a predator waiting in tall grass. I didn't stop working. Hammer rang against steel, sparks lit the dusk. Finally, her window rolled down. Her voice carried across the fence, sharp as ever. "You really think you can stop progress?" I didn't look up. "No," I said, "but I can stop you." Her laugh was brittle, too loud for the still evening. "We'll see. The board meets tomorrow. We're filing an injunction." I muttered, "Good luck," and lit another weld, sparks showering between us. She revved her engine and tore off, gravel spraying in defiance. That night, as the sun sank and shadows stretched long across the pasture, my buddy Hank stopped by. Old rancher, skin like leather, hands calloused from decades of fixing fences. He leaned against a post, arms crossed, watching me work. "You're playing with fire," he said finally. "She's got the sheriff on speed dial. She'll scream harassment the second this backfires." I kept working, sweat dripping from my brow. "Then I'll make sure it doesn't backfire." He studied me for a long moment, then a grin broke across his face. "Hell, I like your style, need a hand." Together we worked late into the night, bolting, welding, testing every seam. By the time the lanterns burned low, the frame stood tall and unyielding. From the outside, it looked almost identical to the old gate, humble cedar, rustic charm. But behind it was steel, concrete, and hidden teeth. When we stepped back, Hank whistled low. "Looks just like the old one, but it ain't, is it?" I shook my head, not even close. By the 5th day, it was done. The gate swung smooth on reinforced hinges, locking into steel brackets sunk deep in concrete. The trenches lay covered in gravel, spikes invisible unless you knew where to look. Even the posts were painted to blend with cedar. To anyone else, it was just a gate. To me, it was justice. That evening, I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, hands blistered, muscles aching, heart steady. The sky was painted orange and crimson, the air heavy with silence. My dogs lay at my feet, tails still, eyes fixed on the road. Karen thought she'd broken me. She thought fines, threats, and SUVs made her untouchable. But she'd forgotten one thing: every bully eventually meets a wall they can't knock down. And tomorrow, when she came barreling down that road again, she was going to find out just how hard that wall could hit back. Saturday afternoon. The sun was high, the sky sharp blue, and the gravel in my driveway shimmered with heat. I sat on the porch, mug of coffee in hand, dogs sprawled at my feet. Every nerve in me was waiting. The trap was set. And if there was one thing I knew about Karen, it was that patience wasn't her virtue. Sure enough, I heard it, that low, throaty growl of her SUV engine echoing off the hills. My dog's ears perked. Dust rose in the distance, curling into the sky. She was coming. Behind her, 2 more vehicles followed. The HOA treasurer's maroon minivan and another board member's sedan. A convoy. My land had become their little parade route, and today they'd planned to make a show of it. Karen didn't slow down. In fact, she sped up. I saw the way her jaw set, her oversized sunglasses gleaming like armor, her knuckles white on the wheel. She wasn't just taking a shortcut, she was proving a point, proving she could break me. I leaned back in my chair, set my mug down on the porch rail, and watched. My heart pounded in my chest, but my face stayed calm. Then it happened. Her SUV slammed into the gate, only this time, the gate didn't budge. No splintering wood. No hinges tearing loose, just the sharp, metallic crack of steel meeting steel. The sound carried through the valley like a gunshot. Her SUV jolted violently, the front end crumpling in an instant. Airbags exploded, puffing white smoke through the cabin. Tires shrieked against gravel as momentum shoved her forward another foot, but the gate held fast, locking her in place like a fly caught in amber. And then came the spikes. As her rear tires skidded over the disguised trench, the steel teeth bit deep. The sound of rubber ripping echoed in my ears, pop, 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 like firecrackers going off. Within seconds, her SUV sagged on shredded wheels, hissing and whining like a wounded beast. Behind her chaos, the minivan swerved into the ditch, fishtailing before stalling out. The sedan screeched to a stop, horn blaring, barely avoiding piling into a wreck. Dust hung thick in the air. Silence followed. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath. Then the screaming began. Karen flung her door open, stumbling out in a cloud of airbag dust. She coughed, eyes wide, face twisted in fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked, pointing at me like I was the criminal. I stood slowly, walked down the porch steps with my dogs at my side, their hackles raised but steady. My boots crunched across gravel as I stopped a good 20 feet from her. "What I've done," I said evenly, "is stop you from trespassing." Her voice cracked into a shrill pitch. "This is illegal. You put lives at risk." I gestured at the wrecked SUV, the bent bumper, the tires shredded down to ribbons. "You were warned, over and over. You chose this." Her face went crimson. "You're finished. The HOA will bury you in lawsuits." I raised an eyebrow, calm as Sunday morning. "On what grounds? You drove through a private gate on private property without permission. That's trespassing." And then I pulled the ace from my pocket, a small black device. I held it up between my fingers. Lucky for me, I installed cameras this time. I pointed to the posts flanking the gate. Small, discreet security cams blinked red in the sun. Her eyes went wide, the blood drained from her face. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said. By now, neighbors had gathered along the road, drawn by the sound of the crash. Phones were out, recording every second. A murmur ran through the crowd, then laughter, then cheers. One man shouted, "Looks like the Queen lost her crown." The crowd roared. Karen spun on them, hair disheveled, voice shrill. "Stop laughing, this is serious." But the more she screamed, the more they laughed. The treasurer crawled out of his minivan, limping, clipboard still in hand like a shield. The sedan driver just sat in his seat, face buried in his palms. And me, I just stood there, arms crossed, letting it all unfold. Minutes later, flashing lights washed over the scene. The sheriff arrived, stepping out of his cruiser with a long sigh. "What in the blazes happened here?" Karen ran to him like a child to a parent. "He set a trap. He sabotaged the road. He could have killed us." The sheriff turned to me. "That true?" I shook my head. "This isn't a public road, Sheriff. It's my land. She's been trespassing for weeks. I reinforced my gate and I installed cameras. You'll see everything you need on the footage." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The sheriff crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, if those cameras show what he says, then you're the one in trouble." The crowd erupted. Cheers, laughter, whistles, phones recording every second of her downfall. For once, Karen was speechless. I walked up to her crumpled SUV, tapped the hood, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Shortcuts closed, Karen." The crowd howled. By the time the tow trucks hauled Karen's convoy of shame out of my driveway, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky orange and red. The sheriff had shaken my hand, muttered something about "we'll be in touch," and left me standing on the porch with neighbors still buzzing about what they'd just witnessed. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. But peace, I would learn, doesn't last long when Karen's involved. The very next morning, I found another envelope in my mailbox, thicker than the last, heavier. Inside was a stack of papers stamped with official-looking seals. At the top, bold letters screamed, "Notice of legal action." According to the document, the HOA was suing me. Reckless endangerment, property damage, obstruction of community easement. They demanded I tear down my gate permanently and pay for the emotional distress suffered by Karen and her fellow board members. Oh, and as a cherry on top, they wanted me to cover the cost of repairing Karen's SUV. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee, but beneath the laughter my blood boiled, because the audacity of it all was staggering. I had been the one harassed, trespassed on, vandalized, and somehow I was the criminal. I didn't waste a minute. I drove straight into town and parked outside the office of an attorney I knew by reputation. Martha, a sharp-eyed woman who'd been practicing property law longer than Karen, had been terrorizing neighbors. Her office smelled faintly of old leather and coffee. She adjusted her glasses, leafed through the papers, and smirked. "Classic HOA overreach," she said. "They don't have jurisdiction over your land and they know it, but they're hoping you'll fold under pressure." "Folding isn't in my vocabulary," I told her. "Good," she said, a grin tugging at her lips, "because this is going to be fun." Martha filed a countersuit that same week. Trespassing, destruction of private property, harassment, attempted fraud through false fines, and thanks to my cameras we had everything on tape. Karen smashing through the gate, the convoy tailgating her, the aftermath of their little joyride, every second documented. When word got back to Karen that I wasn't backing down, she doubled down. 2 days later, I came home to find a crowd of HOA board members standing outside my gate with clipboards in hand, shouting loud enough for the whole street to hear. "This man is dangerous," one cried. "He set a trap that could have killed children," another added. Unsafe structures everywhere. Karen bellowed from the center, waving papers like a general rallying her troops. Neighbors gathered on the roadside, curious. But unlike before, I noticed something different. The crowd wasn't nodding along with Karen. They were murmuring among themselves, shaking their heads, pulling out phones to record. I stepped onto my porch, arms crossed, my voice carried across the pasture. You all want the truth? Watch the footage. Every time she plowed through that gate, every fake fine, every trespass, it's all on camera. I pointed to the neighbors. You've seen it with your own eyes. This isn't about safety, it's about control. For a moment, silence. Then someone in the crowd shouted, "We're tired of the HOA bullying us." Another chimed in, "You tell him, neighbor." The tide was turning. Karen's face paled beneath her makeup, but she held her ground, shrieking, "Lies, all lies." Her voice cracked as she waved papers in the air, but the neighbors weren't buying it anymore. The cracks in her little kingdom were showing. The court hearing was where it all truly unraveled. Karen arrived in a bright red suit, strutting into the courtroom like it was a campaign rally. Board members trailed behind her, clutching binders like nervous ducklings. She smiled to the spectators, waved to a few familiar faces, as though she owned the room. When the judge called the case, Karen's lawyer launched into a dramatic speech. He painted me as some unhinged recluse, obsessed with defending imaginary property rights. He called my gate a booby trap, accused me of endangering the welfare of the community. Then Martha stood, calm, precise, deadly. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence will show that my client's property lies outside HOA jurisdiction. These fines and claims are fraudulent. And as for endangerment, the only danger here was caused by the reckless trespassing of the HOA president and her associates." She clicked a remote and the courtroom screens flickered to life. Video footage rolled. Karen's SUV slamming into the gate, tires bursting on the spikes, neighbors laughing in the background. Then earlier clips, Karen ramming through time after time, shouting community easement, smirking as she tore up my land. By the time the footage ended, the courtroom was buzzing. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, unimpressed with Karen's antics. When Karen was called to testify, it got worse. She lost her cool. "I am the president," she screamed, pointing at me. "He can't defy me, he can't defy the HOA." The judge slammed his gavel. "This is a court of law, not your board meeting. Sit down." Her credibility shattered in seconds. The ruling came swift. The court dismissed the HOA's claims. Instead, they ordered the HOA to pay damages for trespassing and property destruction. Karen herself was fined for harassment and reckless driving. And just like that, her kingdom started to crumble. The day the gavel fell, it felt like the air in Pine Hollow shifted. For months, Karen had strutted around like a queen with a crown. But in that courtroom, her crown cracked. And when the news spread, the pieces started to fall. Within a week, clips of her SUV crumpling against my gate began making the rounds online. At first, it was just neighbors sharing the footage. Then someone edited it with dramatic music, freezing on her shocked face as text appeared. "You shall not pass." Memes spread like wildfire. HOA Karen versus the gate of justice. By the second week, she was the internet's latest punchline. I didn't ask for the attention. I didn't even want it. But I'll admit, watching her swagger dissolve into humiliation was the sweetest relief I'd felt in years. Back in Pine Hollow, the fallout was brutal. Neighbors who'd kept quiet for years suddenly found their voices. Stories poured out, bogus fines, threats, intimidation. People talked about the time she tried to force a family to repaint their house 3 times in one summer because the shade of beige wasn't compliant. Or the single mother she fined for leaving a tricycle on her porch. Board members started resigning one by one. Some slipped away quietly, others left in a storm, refusing to sink with her ship. The HOA's funds bled into legal fees. Karen's once iron grip turned into a desperate scramble for control. And me, I finally had my mornings back. For the first time since moving out here, the sound that woke me wasn't the growl of Karen's SUV. It was the soft nicker of my horses, the creak of the porch chair as I sat with my coffee. But peace is never permanent when you're dealing with someone like her. Weeks later, a certified letter arrived. This one wasn't from the court, it was from Karen herself. I opened it slowly, scanning the words. She was offering a settlement if I agreed to remove my menacing gate and allow limited community passage. She'd drop any remaining complaints. The letter was dressed up in polite language, all about moving forward and healing divisions. I laughed out loud, healing divisions. This was no olive branch, it was a clawing attempt to get back what she'd lost. So I wrote her a response. 1 page, 2 sentences. There is no community easement. I own the road and I have the deed to prove it. See, while she'd been screaming about rights and filing fake fines, I'd been digging deeper. Not only was my land outside her jurisdiction, but the road she loved so much. The shortcut she claimed as community property, it wasn't even listed as public. It was mine, paid for in full, deeded in my name. And I'd been holding that fact like a loaded gun, waiting for the right time. When Karen read my letter, the meltdown was immediate. She stormed onto my property one last time, waving the paper like it was a burning torch. Her voice echoed across the fields. "This is fraud. You can't own that road. It's for the community." I stayed calm, walked to the edge of my porch, arms folded on the railing. My voice carried steady. "Check the county records, Karen. Clerk's office. The deed's in my name. Always has been." Her face twisted, eyes wild with disbelief. She sputtered, words spilling out like a car trying to start without gas. That's impossible." "No," I said quietly. "What's impossible is you ever setting foot on this road again. Consider yourself trespassed." Neighbors gathered again, drawn by the noise, phones up, cameras rolling. Karen spun around, realizing she was outnumbered, outrecorded, and out of power. Something inside her broke. She let out a strangled scream, stomped her heel into the dirt, then stormed off, her voice swallowed by the laughter of those who had once bowed to her. From that day forward, she never drove through my gate again. The HOA limped along, stripped of its tyrant. Meetings became quieter affairs about shrub trimming and mailbox paint, not lawsuits and power plays. The neighbors walked a little taller, spoke a little freer, and Pine Hollow felt lighter. As for me, every evening I'd sit on the porch, coffee in hand, dogs at my feet, watching the sun sink behind my indestructible gate. Not just wood and steel, but a symbol. A line in the dirt that said, "Here and no further." And for the first time since I moved in, I felt like I had truly won. Looking back now, I can still hear it. The first crack of my gate, the smug laugh echoing from Karen's window, the neighbors whispering, "Don't bother fighting her." And then I remember the last time I saw her storm off, clutching a useless piece of paper while the whole neighborhood recorded her defeat. Funny how quickly things can change. After the dust of the courtroom settled and her tantrums faded into memory, Pine Hollow felt like a different place. For the first time in years, people weren't walking on eggshells. They trimmed their hedges without fear of violations. They parked their trucks without worrying about fines. The single mother with the tricycle on her porch, she wheeled it out proudly and nobody said a word. The HOA wasn't gone, but it had been humbled. Karen's voice no longer thundered through meetings. She didn't hand out fines like candy anymore. She barely showed her face at all. Word was she spent most days indoors, blinds drawn, phone calls unanswered. Her power, her crown was gone. And me, my ranch finally became the sanctuary I'd imagined. Mornings were quiet. No headlights cutting across the pasture, no convoys of SUVs spraying gravel like they owned the place. Just the wind through the grass, the soft nicker of horses, and the creak of my porch chair as I sipped coffee. I'd walk past that gate every day, run my hand along the cedar planks and smile. Because I knew what was beneath: steel, concrete, strength. Not just a barrier to keep out SUVs, but a reminder that some lines are worth defending. Neighbors still bring it up from time to time. They'll smile, shake their heads, and say, "You really showed her." But I don't think about it as revenge anymore. I think about it as survival, dignity, the choice to stand when it would have been easier to kneel. Because here's the truth, life will always have people like Karen. Folks who think rules don't apply to them, who laugh at your boundaries, push past your warnings, and act like your no means nothing. They'll test your patience. They'll push until you break. But here's what I learned. Breaking isn't the only option. You can build, you can reinforce. You can stand taller than the storm that's trying to tear you down. And sometimes you have to remind people that respect isn't given, it's earned. That gate taught me more than I ever expected. It taught me that silence doesn't mean surrender, that a man's peace is worth fighting for. That sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to plant your feet, dig deep, and say, "Not here, not now, not ever." And I'll tell you something else. My gate wasn't just about wood and steel. Your gate might not be either. Maybe yours is your time. Maybe it's your energy. Maybe it's your dignity or your peace of mind. Whatever it is, don't let anyone trample through it just because they think they can. Set your boundaries, reinforce them. And when someone tries to bulldoze through, don't back down, because if you don't protect what's yours, no one else will. I leaned back in my porch chair one evening, sun sinking low, dogs curled up at my feet. My hands still bore the scars from building that gate, burn marks from welding, calluses from hauling steel. They weren't just marks of work. They were marks of a fight won the right way. I looked at that gate, standing tall and strong, and whispered to myself, "Some gates swing open, some gates fight back." And for me, that was the sweetest victory of all. So I'll leave you with this. What's the gate in your life that you need to protect? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, there are plenty more HOA battles, Karen dramas, and tales of sweet, sweet karma coming your way. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.